And if you talk to the experts, most of them are going to tell you that the Phoenicians were really what we consider to be the world's first travelers. Yes, there were hunter and gatherer societies before, but that wasn't really traveling, that was just kind of wandering around. Yes, sir?
What about the Vikings? Like, what would it be?
Phoenicians were before them.
Okay.
Anybody Phoenician in here? Phoenician blood in them? Anybody know where Phoenicia is? You do? Where is it at?
Modern day, right?
Yeah, it's right there at, the city is Tyre, T-Y-R-E. But yeah, right there on the shores, right around there. The Iraqis consider themselves Phoenicians. And the Phoenicians were amazing people. They did a lot of cool things that carry over even today, besides being the world's first traveler. The Phoenicians gave us a couple of things. What's one that you're using right now?
Alphabet.
You said the alphabet. Whoever said it, you're correct. The alphabet. Yeah, you said it. The alphabet. A, B, C, D, right? The Phoenicians came up with the first systematized alphabet writing. Now, it ties in with why they were travelers. Now, the Phoenicians, if you know anything about the area, it's not very good for growing things. Basically olive trees and that's it. And back in the day, you grew what you ate, you grew. In order to not starve, you had to grow things. And the climate was very bad for growing things. And so the Phoenicians figured out very quickly, if we don't do something, we're going to starve to death. And so they came up with this plan, and it's a brilliant plan. The Phoenicians couldn't grow things, but they could make things. The Phoenicians were artisans. Carpenters and jugs and clays and potteries, and they were really good at it. But you can't eat that, right? But what can you do with it? You can trade it. Excellent. You can go to places where people grow things, and you say, hey, you grow a lot of grain, how do you store it? Look at this pot, you can store grain in here. I'll trade you this for some of your grain. That's a pretty good idea. And so the Phoenicians figured this out, and the Phoenicians also were really the world's first, what we call professional sailors. They figured out how to build boats, and they sailed around the Mediterranean all the time, engaging in trade. Going to Greece, going to Italy, going anywhere where they were growing things, and they traded things. Okay. Now, it's important to note that they're travelers, they're tourists, but they're not traveling for fun. They're traveling for business, right? To stay alive, to trade for things to eat. And so they became really good at it. And this is where the alphabet ties in, okay? What's your name? Haley. Okay, Haley. I'm a sailor, I'm a trader, and you carve chairs. And you come up to me and you say, Captain Scott, I got 6 chairs, I want you to trade for me. Okay? I've got to stay here and make chairs, you're traveling around. Trade these chairs for me. Would you do that, please? I say, absolutely, I will. So I take your 6 chairs, and I go to, let's say, Greece, and I trade it. When I come back, and you say, hey, Captain Scott, did you trade all my chairs? I say, absolutely, I did. And you say, well, give me, the grain for that. I said, here you go. 4 chairs equals this much grain. You're like, whoa, wait a minute. I gave you 6 chairs. I said, no, you gave me 4 chairs. You said, no, I gave you 6 chairs. And we go on like this all day long. Problem. He said, she said, right? How do you solve that? Contract, record it. When you give me the 6 chairs, you say, I'm giving you 6 chairs here. Sign this, please. And I sign that. And so when I come back and say, oh, I only sold 4 of your chairs, you say, your signature in here says 6 chairs. You owe me grain for 6 chairs. And that's why the alphabet came about. The Phoenicians kept records of things that they were trading. So there was none of this 4 chairs, 6 chairs stuff. Does that make sense? And so, listen, the alphabet came about to keep trade records, and that's why they traveled, was to trade. Isn't that kind of cool? But again, they weren't traveling for fun. In fact, it was probably pretty dangerous. You know, the boats they made were not like Seacraft or Boston whalers. They were basically made out of trees and sticks and reeds, and they just tied it all together. And if you got into a storm, I bet a lot of them went to the bottom of the Mediterranean there. Okay, so they traveled, but not for fun. Trade was the motivation. They were business travelers. Up until that point, people basically stayed where they were. Fast forward. Now, I was actually a history major before I switched to business. And my favorite civilization of ancient time were the Romans. The Romans were really cool. They did a lot of great things. What did the Romans do that was so great?
Created roads.
Who said that? Absolutely. Made roads. Were they good at it? How do you know that?
Because it was like the largest network of roads for the world.
Not only is it the largest network, but if you go now over to Europe, what's still there? Roman roads. Thousands of years old. They created such good roads, they're still around today. Absolutely. What else did they do? Aqueducts? Who said that? Yep, aqueducts. Great builders.
Sewers.
Sewers, yep, builders. How about military?
Okay.
Oh yeah! What did the Romans conquer? Anything they wanted. Anything they wanted. If the Romans wanted it, they took it. Why? Because they were very well organized. Okay? They were so organized, and someone figured this out. Now, they conquered most of the known Western world. Yeah, I know they didn't get to China, but they didn't want to go to China. They conquered what they wanted. Now, but think of this. You know, that's a lot of area. And even though the Roman army was large, it was not large enough that they could keep armies in every city that they conquered. So what did they do? They conquered a city. And then they said, okay, we're going to leave a small garrison of soldiers behind. Maybe 100. What, you know, a century? Century's 100. Centurions? They usually left a century behind. 100 soldiers in a town of a couple thousand people that hate you. That's a problem, isn't it? Right? Because at some point, the local civilians may say, hey, we hate Rome, and we're getting a little antsy right now, and your little 100 soldiers are not going to stand up to a crowd of about 5,000 people. So, if you're Rome, how do you solve that? We got theme music here. That's it. How do you solve it?
Your military tactics.
Huh?
Your tactics.
Yeah. Well, one of their tactics was this thing called building roads. What's the saying about Roman roads? All roads lead to Rome. It should actually say all roads lead out of Rome, so we can get soldiers wherever we want really quick and kick people's asses. Because what would happen is, let's say you've got your 100 men in a town, and you start to hear, hey, the people are getting upset, they're going to revolt. You'd send a messenger to Rome saying, hey, the locals are getting antsy here, send troops. And they would marshal these big, huge garrisons, and they would march on these roads to get to that town right away. If you were a civilian and you were thinking about attacking Rome, and you saw, 2,000 soldiers show up at your front door, what's going to happen? Yeah, maybe later. Right? So that's why they built the roads. Not for you and I to travel around and take pictures of, but for the armies. They did it to move people from place to place really fast. And did it work for them? It worked great for them. You just have to read all the Roman battles, and they move people really quick because of the road system. I think that's really cool. Now, the Romans did something else. Because they were so successful in organizing things and laws and agriculture and aqueducts, they actually created what we consider to be the world's first leisure class. And leisure class is exactly what you think it is. People who don't have to work for a living. They're rich people, and they own farms and slaves, and so they don't have to work in the fields or go in the mines or sail the ships. So what do they do all day? Sit around and get bored. Yeah, maybe go to an orgy or, or whatever. But they're mostly bored. And so if you're bored, you and your friends are sitting around on the weekend and you're bored, what do you do? Well, you go to the Coliseum, but we went to the Coliseum the last 3 weekends.
There's shows.
Yeah, that's boring.
Visit other places.
Hit the road. Don't you all say, road trip? Who says that?
Disney.
Road trip, right? The Romans were the first people to say road trip. And what did they use? Roads. The roads were built for the military, but most of the people who actually ended up using them were the leisure class tourists. And the Romans that were rich enough would actually travel on these roads to go see all these sites. In fact, we know of 2 cities that are very famous that the Romans used to go to that were party central. They were the spring break of Rome at the time. Does anybody know the 2 cities? A lot of roads led to these places.
Ibiza,
Nope, not Ibiza.
Athens.
Nope. Anybody ever hear of Pompeii and Herculaneum? You guys have heard of Pompeii now, you're kidding me, right? Why do we know so much about Pompeii?
Burned down. Volcano.
Yeah, Vesuvius the volcano dumped ash on it, killed everybody, but in the process it preserved everything. Has anybody ever been? How cool is it?
It's really cool. It's
And
kinda
you can-
scary, though.
Huh?
It's kind of scary.
I bet it is creepy.